the routine, the management of the for the heavyweight title of the world, Wild Bill Longson.
Before the Piledriver became a spectacular finishing move, before it was banned by the biggest company in the world, it was a weapon. And the man most responsible for introducing it to professional wrestling was Wild Bill Longson, one of the most sadistic and believable villains of the 1930s and 1940s. Longson wasn't a flashy technician or a charismatic hero. He was a brute, thick, heavy, and unapologetically cruel. He cultivated an image that blurred the line between performance and genuine menace. Wrestling was still presented as a legitimate sport in his era, and Longson leaned fully into that illusion. When he used the Piledriver, hoisting an opponent upside down and driving them headfirst into the mat, it wasn't a crowd-pleasing flourish. It was portrayed as an act so dangerous it bordered on criminal. As a heel, Longson weaponized fear. Fans didn't cheer his Piledriver, they recoiled from it. The move reinforced his persona as a man who didn't just want to win, but to permanently damage anyone who stood across from him. In an era without blood capsules, cinematic camera cuts, or choreographed spot fests, Longson's Piledriver was effective precisely because it was simple and horrifying. Wild Bill Longson wasn't just a bad guy in the ring. He helped define what a wrestling villain was. Someone whose offense told a story of cruelty, control, and consequence. The true archetype of a wrestling heel. And every time a modern wrestler teases a Piledriver to get a gasp from the crowd, they're tapping into a fear Longson introduced nearly a century ago. Wild Bill Longson was born Willard Rowe Longson on June 8, 1906 in Salt Lake City, Utah. A tough former amateur wrestling champion in his home state, Longson turned professional while holding the Intermountain AAU Heavyweight Championship. He made his professional debut on April 17, 1931, against Al Newman in Salt Lake City, a match that drew local press attention despite ending in a 21-minute loss. Reviews were positive, highlighting Longson's impressive array of holds, physical strength, and natural athleticism. Following his debut, Longson quickly rose through the grappling ranks in Utah, gaining notice not only for his technical ability, but for his increasingly villainous roughhouse tactics. His willingness to bend the rules, combined with a punishing, believable moveset, helped establish the ruthless persona that would later make him one of the most feared and effective heels of his generation. By January 1937, Bill Longson was no longer just another tough grappler grinding out matches in the West. He was good enough to be placed in a headline bout opposite Man Mountain Dean, the 350-pound attraction, whose size alone was often treated as a foregone conclusion. Dean won as expected, crushing Longson after 19 minutes with his signature flying board jump, a body splash that flattened his opponent beneath his weight. Within days, Longson's back pain after the match became unbearable. A few days later, he was forced to seek medical help, and the news was devastating. Doctors discovered a severe spinal injury, one serious enough that the word catastrophic was not an exaggeration. Longson was placed in a full body cast and confined to a wheelchair, receiving friends and well-wishers while confronting the very real possibility that he might never walk again. At just 30 years old, and only 6 years into a career that was finally beginning to gain traction, it appeared that Bill Longson's time in professional wrestling was over. Against expectations, Longson began to improve. By the following month, he had regained his mobility, a small miracle that suggested his story was not finished after all. That autumn, his name appeared on a familiar card at McCullough's Arena, not as a competitor, but as a referee. It was a cautious return, a way back into the ring without risking everything at once. Then, a few weeks later, Bill Longson would wrestle his first match since the injury that nearly ended his career. What followed was the most dominant run of Longson's career. In an era before the National Wrestling Alliance unified the sport in 1948, the National Wrestling Association World Heavyweight Championship was widely considered the most prestigious title in professional wrestling. Longson captured that championship 3 times, with reigns in 1942, 1943, and 1947, holding the sport's top prize for more than 5 cumulative years. With success came refinement. Longson embraced an arrogant, punishing heel persona that felt personal rather than theatrical. His moveset was cruel in its simplicity, grinding headlocks that drained opponents of hope, airplane spins that disoriented and humiliated them in an early, terrifying version of the Piledriver. Longson's championship reigns unfolded against some of the most formidable names in professional wrestling history. He feuded intensely with Lou Thez, Whipper Billy Watson, Ed Strangler Lewis, and the flamboyant phenomenon Gorgeous George, clashes that helped define the sport's transition from legitimate contest to modern spectacle. These rivalries played out most prominently in St. Louis, Missouri, a city Longson had relocated to early in his career, and one that would become synonymous with his dominance. During this time, St. Louis emerged as one of wrestling's most important territories, and Longson was its anchor. During World War II, while much of the country was unsettled, Longson's presence at the top of the card provided consistency and credibility, drawing massive crowds and routinely filling venues. At his peak, he was the territory's most reliable draw, earning as much as $1,500 per appearance, a staggering sum for the era and a testament to his box office value. As his in-ring career slowed, Longson's influence only deepened. In St. Louis, he became more than a featured performer. He became part of the machinery that kept the territory running. Working closely with Sam Muchnick, Longson served as a minority partner and booker for the St. Louis Wrestling Club, handling matchmaking and event planning throughout the 1940s and 1950s. His understanding of psychology, crowd control, and territorial politics helped sustain St. Louis as one of the most stable and respected promotions within the National Wrestling Alliance. In 1960, Longson retired from professional wrestling after suffering a broken pelvis while riding an unbroken horse, an accident as brutal and unglamorous as the era he helped define. It was not an injury sustained under the lights of the ring, but it marked the definitive end of a life spent around physical risk. Even after stepping away from regular involvement, Longson remained a quiet presence behind the scenes. His advisory role extended into the 1970s, where he offered guidance on NWA politics and operations, drawing on decades of experience as a former world champion and promoter. He continued contributing in booking and promotional capacities until 1977, closing the final chapter of a career that had shaped multiple eras of professional wrestling. Wild Bill Longson's legacy rests not merely in the championships he held, but in the role he helped invent. In the 1940s, when professional wrestling still leaned heavily on the illusion of sporting legitimacy, Longson emerged as one of the first truly effective heel world champions, an arrogant, domineering antagonist whose very presence elevated the stakes of every title match. At a time when professional wrestling was fragmented across competing territories, Longson's dominance helped legitimize the association's world title as a unifying symbol of supremacy. Promoters learned that controversy sold just as effectively as heroism. Crowds turned out in massive numbers, not simply to see Longson win, but to see him finally lose. That dynamic, building entire promotions around the promise of a hated champion's downfall, became a foundational booking strategy, one that regional territories refined, and that the National Wrestling Alliance would later formalize following its creation in 1948. Despite this, Longson's name has faded from popular memory. In 2006, he was posthumously inducted into the Professional Wrestling Hall of Fame as part of the Pioneer category, a formal acknowledgement of his contributions to the sport's early development and his stature as a multi-time world champion. Today, he is often described as a forgotten legend, a paradoxical figure whose impact on wrestling's evolution, particularly during and after World War II, far outweighs his modern recognition. Yet the template he created remains unmistakable. Every long-reigning villain champion, every promotion built around audience resentment, and every title match fueled by the desire to see arrogance punished traces its lineage back to Wild Bill Longson, a man who proved that sometimes the most powerful force in wrestling isn't the hero, but the one everyone is paying to watch fall.